Cruise news time. Well, we've got the government on record about the cruise industry. Are they for it? Are they against it? And another governor is threatening to sue. How about that? Let's talk about it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Lido Loca. I'm your host, Tony, here with the latest cruise news updates. Well, what a fast and furious week it's been in the cruise news, especially around the restart of cruising in the United States. We're just barely past a week of the CDC releasing their new Phase 2A guidance for the restart of cruising, and it seems like everything's broken loose since then. We had early in the week Norwegian Cruise Line writing a letter to the CDC saying, let us do it this way. And we're still waiting for the CDC to respond to Norwegian Cruise Line. We had CLIA, the Cruise Line International Association, offering their own letter to the CDC, asking that cruise lines be able to restart in July. And we don't have a really clear answer to that. And then we got that Bloomberg article where somebody from the CDC signaled that they feel like cruise ships could start sailing again from the U.S. by July if they follow the guidance, and that was a whole nother thing. Carnival saying they may cruise from somewhere else. They had no intention of leaving the U.S., but if things continue to be unfavorable here, then they would go somewhere else. And cruise lines announcing cruises from other places, Norwegian getting in that game. And let us not forget, toward the end of the week, the governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis, he brought a lawsuit against the CDC and the government. And somewhat shockingly, cruising was talked about quite a bit in the press room at the White House at the daily press briefings. Press Secretary Jen Psaki got asked cruise questions. The same day that the lawsuit was filed in Florida, she was asked about that, and basically she said they're deferring to the CDC, whatever the CDC wants to do. She was asked whether or not cruise was included in the administration's idea of getting back to normalcy by the 4th of July. She said no, cruise was not considered in that. And then the very last thing that happened this week on Friday, April the 9th, at the last press briefing for the week, Jen Psaki was joined by Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And both of them were asked cruise questions. And so I want to look at those cruise questions. There's another governor that may be filing a lawsuit. And I talked to some of the leadership at CLIA about whether or not the administration is favorable or not favorable to cruising. I would like to give you some insight on that. That's a big bomb to drop to see what CLIA thinks. So stay tuned to the end for that. Again, that's a lot. Welcome to the show. If you're new here or if you've been hanging around lurking in the wings, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. That way you get this news as quick as I put it out, and really you become part of the virtual cruising community. Be a part of the locafam by subscribing with the notification bell. It doesn't cost anything. It helps us with YouTube, and yeah. Thanks in advance. Whew. All right, let's go to the press room on Friday where Press Secretary Jen Psaki joined by Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. These are two officials in the current administration, and they're asked cruise questions. The first is a question that is put toward Pete Buttigieg. All I know is the person asking the question. His name's Ed. I don't know where he's from. But here's Ed's question. Secretary, thanks for doing this. Being at the briefing. Along with you and Chris here, I'm having some alternate universe flashbacks, laughter, other times and other places. I guess they know each other. Since you're transportation secretary, travel, obviously a big part of what you have to worry about to Americans eager to get back overseas, whether it's by plane, by cruise ship. As you know, there have been questions about the cruise industry, especially this past week. Maybe it's that lawsuit. CDC issued some guidance. There's concerns that it perhaps doesn't have enough specifics or specific benchmarks, I guess. Have you been in touch with the CDC about that industry's concerns? And to cruise industry leaders who say we should be treated more like the airlines, what would you say? It's a good question. It's a question a lot of us have, and now we're asking the guy that's in charge of transportation here in the United States, should cruise lines be treated like the airlines, and what's it going to take to get this industry restarted? This is the way Secretary Buttigieg answers. He said, well, the bottom line is safety, right? Yes, that's it. We're all down with that. And look, I'm the Secretary of Transportation. Yes, we know that, Pete. I can't wait for us to be on the move as much as possible in a safe and responsible way, but it's got to be safe and responsible. And airlines have one safety profile, cruise ships have another, vehicles have another, and each one needs to be treated based on what's safe for that sector. I don't argue with that. Planes are not cruise ships, and cruise ships are not trains. And so, yes, they all do have a different safety profile, and you would hope that everything would be equitable. That's a common word right now. Hopefully, the way that the guidance is applied would be equitable based on the profile of those travel sectors. Secretary Buttigieg goes on to say, I'll tell you, I certainly care a lot about seeing the cruise sector thrive, and I know the CDC is hopeful that a lot of these operations will be in position to be sailing mid-summer. And laying out these specific kind of gates that they need to get through is a very important step toward that. Ed re-asked the question, and to the industry leaders who say midsummer is too late, to the governors who say that it's too late for our state economies, what would you say? Secretary Buttigieg responds, we want to do this as soon as we responsibly can, but we also have to make sure it's safe. So a common message, leaning on common answers that we have heard before. I do like the fact that Secretary Buttigieg is, saying good things about cruising, that he wants to see cruising strive, but he is tied to the idea, like much of the rest of the administration, that the CDC is the gatekeeper, and we're going to lean on the gatekeeper to decide when cruising can start. He references the framework here, and we know that the rub right now between the cruise industry and the CDC is that framework. Cruise industry finds it unworkable to get cruising started this summer. The CDC feels like it is workable because they keep saying that they believe that there are companies that can get to where they have cruises midsummer inside the framework. That continues to be the rub. But here we go. Administration official, positive words about cruising. I like that. And then almost at the end of the press conference, we get a significant question about cruising from Alaska. This time the question is directed to the press secretary, Jen Psaki. The question comes, okay, so Republicans and Democrats here have requested a temporary waiver of the rule that blocks cruise ships from coming to Alaska without that Canadian stop. And I was curious what the administration thinks of those requests and whether action is possible before the end of the summer tourist season. So the question is about the Passenger Vessel Services Act. How do you get around the Canadian cruise ban? Secretary Psaki answers, well, we heard all about this earlier from some of your colleagues here in the White House briefing room, not specific to Alaska, but the cruise industry in general. It's certainly an industry that we want to thrive, and we want to ensure we are reopening capacity in a safe manner and doing that as quickly as we can. I will say that we have been working with Senator Murkowski and Alaska officials on engaging Canada and finding ways to assist the cruise ships. That's a process that's ongoing. Unfortunately, I don't have more details, but it is something we are fully aware of that we are working with your senators to help address, and we certainly recognize the importance of the cruise ship industry to the Alaska economy. Now, again, it's a lot of stuff that we've heard before, but I'm happy with the consistent message from the administration that they are looking for the cruise industry to thrive. Now, I'm not naive here. I'm sure that a lot of people will just run this data through their political filter, and based on how they feel politically is how they will treat this responses from the administration. I continue to do the same thing I did with the last administration. I try not to think about it through the political filter. I just try to think about the things that are being said and then the actions that correspond with that. Do the actions meet the words? Right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern. And so even though I hear the administration saying that we would like the industry to thrive, I still see the fact that the CDC is the gatekeeper and the gates are pretty challenging right now. I think it's easy to default on safety, which I do appreciate that. And so I do want a better alignment between the message and the actions. Cruise lines are begging, saying, hey, look, we're in the hurt locker. If you really want the industry to thrive in Alaska, if you want the industry to thrive out of U.S. ports, we need a path, a timeline where we can cruise this summer. And so far, that's not so much forthcoming. But interestingly, I did ask the question. I got to talk to a leader over in CLIA, and I did ask the question, do you think that the administration is favorable, not favorable toward cruising? What do you think about this idea that some people postulate that, the administration is trying to ruin cruising? A really interesting conversation that I want to share with you guys, but I do have one more news story to stick in there. governor. There is another governor that is saying that they will sue the government, sue the CDC if they do not see some relief. What state do you think it's from? No, it's not Texas. It is the governor in Alaska, Mike Dunleavy. In a recent interview, he was talking about the challenges that Alaska has. If the Alaskan cruise season is canceled again this year, it's going to represent about a $3.3 billion loss for Alaska, a state that only has a GDP of about $56 billion, so a significant number of lost revenue for the state of Alaska. And when he was asked, will you sue? He said, look, if there's not any positive dialogue this week, talking about the week coming up, then what else can we do? Yeah, we might have to sue the government to see if we will get some relief. And so another governor talking about suing the government over this cruise business. A lot of pressure going forth on the U.S. cruise restart this past week. A lot of media outlets talking about it, big media outlets. Of course, the governor's talking about it. And the conversation about the U.S. cruise restart making it all the way to the White House press room. I had the opportunity to talk to a leader over at CLIA, the Cruise Line International Association, and that was my main question. You know, what is the deal? Do you feel like the CDC, that the administration, that they're out to get cruising? That's a common narrative that we see around cruising communities. And the gentleman that I talked to over there, he said, not at all. He said, I know people at the CDC that are pro-cruising. I know people that are in the administration that are pro-cruising, and that the dialogue continues to go forth. And I tell you what, I was super encouraged by that. One thing that frustrates me in our cruising community, in the virtual community where you can just sit behind a keyboard and type out any comments, is we have a lot more name calling than we have dialoguing. And if you look at how organizations interact with each other, if you look at how the cruise lines interact with the CDC, if you look at how CLIA interacts with the CDC or with the administration, you know that it is a process where you're making your case. It is a dialogue. It is a working toward a compromise. And even at their most passionate, you don't have people from both sides calling each other names. For example, Frank Del Rio, very passionate this week, making the case for cruising, making the case for Norwegian, challenging the CDC on issues of fairness, challenging the CDC on please show us why we can't cruise, but never once really being that disrespectful about it. And I think that's a good lesson that we can learn. It's a lesson that we can solve things without denigrating our conversation into name calling and alienation. So for me, I see a lot of interesting arguments put forth in the comments, but I tell you, the arguments that never make an impact on me are arguments that have name calling in it from either side. Like, I'll read 3 or 4 sentences of really articulate, well spelled out argument to consider, and I try to start to process that, and then I get to the last couple lines that's just full of name calling and belittlement. And I tell you what, if you're really, this is, and again, I don't know why I'm soapboxing about this, but if you're really interested in persuading people to believe the things that you believe, to influence people in the way that you want to influence them, you completely lose, I would say, a majority of the people as soon as you belittle them or call them a name. So that would be my challenge to you. Can you make an argument that makes sense without name calling on both sides? Let's try that. That's what's happening at the upper levels here. That's what's happening at CLIA, CDC, cruise lines, government. They're all opposed on some issues, but they're all working together in a way that seems reasonable. What do you think? What do you think about the messages being put out by the administration, by CDC? Will cruising resume mid-summer? And what do you think about Alaska? Do you think we'll see another lawsuit this week? Interesting times. Very busy for the restart of cruising. I anticipate this next week to be similar. Hold on to what you got. And one thing you can do for sure with certainty is crush the like button. Go ahead and do that. Watch this video that YouTube recommends. A big thank you on a Sunday for me for watching the show. Tony with Lido Loca. And until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.